latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, it has been said, shall we say, that if I wanted more hits, more views, I should probably make my videos more corporate, more like everybody else's, not to use the iconography, the music, all that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, I probably could do that in fairness, but it then wouldn't be my show, would it? It would be just me trying to copy the other people on YouTube and what have you that are doing their videos and shows, and well, it would kind of lose its uniqueness, I think, and I like to think that, that my show is quite unique. It isn't like anybody else's, and that's part of it. Alright, maybe I'm not getting quite so many views as other people, but hell, you know, I don't really want to make a show just like everybody else's. I want to make my show. This is mine. You know, okay, probably a bit pig-headed and stubborn, but there you go. That's the way I want to do it. So I'm doing it my way. Anyway, enough of that. Like I said last week, we're still doing the gin thing, and this is the first time I've actually done an episode of the show on cask-aged or barrel-aged gins, however you want to pronounce it or call this subsector of the gin thing. And personally, I like barrel-aged gins. Well, I like whiskey, and I think if gin is going to carry on sort of running its course, I think it's got to obviously innovate, and I think sort of one of the things it can certainly innovate in is cask-aged gins, and there are a lot more available. I mean, just go back a couple of years when, well, probably more than that actually, sort of three, four possibly, when I first started doing the World Gin Awards, the cask gin part of the competition was pretty minimal. Had about 2 or 3 entrants, and this year there was probably about a dozen or so. So it's obviously something that gin distillers are looking at doing, to sort of try something a little bit different. It's also kind of a jump between whiskey and gin. It's sort of like, okay, it's appealing to maybe the sort of the crossover market. You know, if you like your gins, is something else to try, maybe then get into whiskey and vice versa, you know, because they have obviously elements that sort of drinkers of gin and whiskey would be familiar with for obvious reasons. And the thing is with cask aging spirit, as we know with whiskey, is that sort of 70-80% of the flavour of whiskey, for argument's sake, comes from the casks. Now, that's fine with when you're talking about whiskey, because obviously that's what you want. Now, with gin, it's a completely different ball game. You don't want too much oak character, because the oak will become too intrusive and you will lose the characteristics of your gin. On the other hand, obviously, if you don't age it for long enough, you sort of taste it and you go, well, where's the oak? What's the point in calling it an oak-aged gin or barrel-aged gin or whatever? And I think I've chosen sort of 6 barrel-aged gins that I think kind of represent both sides of that argument. These are not the 6 best, and they're not the worst, but I think hopefully when we get round to tasting them, I'll kind of explain why I think some of them work and some of them don't work quite so well. So I think that's going to be quite interesting, and like I said, I think this is kind of the future of gin, along with Juniper and other such things. I think this is a sort of a category that may well carry on growing. You know, after this sort of everybody's not necessarily lost interest in gin, but once it's not had its kind of moment in the spotlight, so to speak. But anyway, let's have a look at today's lineup. It was easy to forget everything I've learned in the first place. Okay, so as per usual, instead of tasting these good versus bad, well, no, that's the wrong way of looking at it. should we say, successful versus not quite so successful. I've decided I'm not going to do it that way. I'll just do it as I normally do it, lowest ABV up to highest ABV. So we're going to kick off with a Canadian gin called the Black Fox Spirits Vapour Infused Dry Gin Barrel Aged, bottled at 42%. God, that's a gobful and a half, isn't it? So obviously, I believe this is batch 2. They obviously make small batches, use slightly different botanicals for each of their batches. The distillery itself is in Canada. It was opened in 2015. It's also a farm where they grow the ingredients that they use. The base spirit is made from a combination of wheat spirit and triticale or triticale spirit. Triticale is a kind of a wheat rye hybrid grain, and I certainly have come across it a couple of times. With I think it's Fused Spirits have done a whiskey made purely from that. So that's the base spirit from the distillery. Now, if this, which I think it is batch 2, the botanicals included pumpkin flowers, interesting, cucumber, coriander, licorice, and of course, obviously, juniper. So I think that will be quite interesting to see what that one is like. The second one we're going to be looking at is from the good old Cotswolds Distillery. This is the Cotswolds 1616 Barrel Aged Gin, bottled at 46%. Now, most gin distillers tend to, I guess, take their regular gin and just age it in cask. There's very few, I think, tend to sort of essentially create a completely different gin purely to age in barrel, but it certainly seems that the Cotswold Distillery have done that. So unlike their standard gin, which is made from a wheat base, they take, for the barrel aged gin, they take their malt spirit. As you know, they've been making whiskey, and indeed, as you remember, I did an episode of the show on their nascent whiskey, should we say. So anyway, they take their malt spirit and redistill it with botanicals that they believe kind of work well with the whole oak aging concept. So they use obviously juniper, coriander, cassia bark, nutmeg, orange, and other secret, in inverted commas, botanicals, whatever they actually are. And I'm guessing that sort of maybe more spice orientated is possibly going to kind of work quite nicely with the oak characteristics. It may well be emphasised by them. I mean, one thing I often tend to find incidentally with oak aged gins is that the botanicals, when they're using herbally based botanicals, tend to become quite mentholated. I mean, I don't know if that is kind of how those particular botanicals interact with the oak or not, but it has seemed to be a kind of characteristic that I have discovered in oak aged gins. Anyway, so the barrels they use for aging this in are ex-American oak and ex-red wine casks. I don't know how long they leave it in there for. Likewise, the Black Fox bottling, because I mean both of them have a reasonable amount of colour. But then again, as you know, you don't need to leave your spirit in an oak cask for very long for it to pick up colour. Certainly not if it's a first fill cask anyway. Right, so moving on to the third one, we're looking at the Herno. Now, as you know from last week, I really liked the Navy Strength and the standard London dry gin that they did. And incidentally, I thought obviously the cask strength should really have won London dry gin. Or the best London dry gin, but anyway, it didn't. So I'm guessing that this is the standard spirit, which is obviously juniper, coriander, meadow sweet, cassia bark, black pepper, vanilla, lingonberries, and lemon peel, aged for 30 days apparently in 39.25 litre casks. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the casks are not made from the usual oak. These are made from ex-juniper wood. Now, so could be interesting, but completely no colour whatsoever. Now, so obviously it's either that the sort of juniper oak doesn't contain a lot of colouring vanillins and that kind of thing. But we shall see. We shall see when we get to the actual tasting of it. And this is bottled at 47%. The fourth bottling we'll be looking at, again, is bottled at 47% and is again a Scandinavian gin. This is, what's that, Scandinavian? Yeah, that kind of area. This is the Vor pot-stilled Icelandic barrel-aged gin. Now, it is produced at the, now I'm probably going to pronounce the name of the distillery completely wrong, Imverk, possibly, which was founded in 2009. It's made from 100% Icelandic grown barley, and I believe all the botanicals are Icelandic, and it seems to be the way with the Scandinavians, that they do like to sort of, I'm not saying that other countries don't either, but it just seems to be a noticeable thing from the Scandinavian distilleries that they tend to sort of love to use locally sourced botanicals. So here we have Icelandic juniper, rhubarb, crowberries, which are small blackberries of some form or description, angelica root, birch leaves, creeping thyme, kale, Icelandic moss, and sweet kelp. And like I said, bottled at 47%. Don't know what barrels they've been aged in and for how long. Certainly their website doesn't seem to make any mention at all of their barrel aged gin. It obviously mentions their sort of standard gin, but certainly doesn't seem to say anything about their barrel aged gin. So don't know anything about that whatsoever. And then finally, well, not finally, the second to last bottling we'll be looking at is the Koval barrel aged gin, again bottled at 47%. Again, don't know a huge amount about this apart from I believe the they do a similar thing to the Cotswolds in that they tailor the botanicals to for this particular gin for the barrel aging. So it's not, I don't believe it's the same botanical lineup that they use for their standard gin. All I know is that this includes juniper, rosehip, angelica and coriander, and is aged in their ex-whiskey barrels, because as you know the Koval distillery makes whiskey, so this would have been aged in American oak. So we shall see what that one is like. And then we get on to the last one. The last one is the Navy Strength. This is bottled at 57% and is the Ableforth's cask-aged Bathtub Navy Strength gin. Try saying that after you've had a few of those. Like I said, bottled at 57%. This is aged in American oak. It's aged in ex-Fused spirits casks. Now, the reason they use Fused spirits casks is that the distributors, Atom, distribute Fused spirits as well, so obviously they have a ready access to the casks. Now, the interesting thing about this particular gin, apart from it being a compound gin, whereas all the other gins that I have here are distilled, the casks they use are quite interesting. They use octave casks, which are very, very small casks, and they age it for 3 months in first fill American oak, and then further 6 months in refill. Now, obviously, small casks means large surface area, liquid to wood, quick maturation, obviously quick pickup of oak character. You don't want to leave it in first fill small casks for too long, otherwise it will become overtly oaky. So obviously they take it out of those, put them into refilled casks, just to carry on and kind of to sort of, I guess, round out the oak characteristics. The spirit itself, botanical wise, is made from juniper, orange peel, coriander, cinnamon, clove, cardamom, and like I said, is cold infused. And so it does seem to me that a lot of these gins that are having maybe their botanicals tailored towards oak aging are using more spices, and I'm guessing this is obviously going to sort of, you know, be because the spice character from the wood as well is going to influence it, and you know it should work out quite nicely. But anyway, like I said, we shall see when we kick off with the Canadian.
Every single step I do is new. I can't remember.
So let's kick off with the Black Fox. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Now, straight off the bat, it's kind of says to me classic oak aged gin. It's got that kind of camphory, slightly medicinal, herbal kind of character. There's a little bit of black pepper, almost some green cardamom possibly. Obviously, if this is batch 2, which I think it is, there is no cardamom at all in it. But this is the thing about gins. Often when you're sort of tasting them neat, sometimes you just pick up notes that remind you of something completely different, and it's got quite a hefty oak content, it has to be said, but it's got a lovely intensity, and even though the oak is quite intense, it's not overpowering it. The botanicals are kind of really up there and really sort of not letting the oak overpower the spirit whatsoever. Incidentally, this was the best barrel-aged gin. Certainly was awarded the gong for the best barrel-aged gin, and I certainly rated this the highest out of all of them. And you can see why. This has just got such a lovely intensity, and there's a lovely crispness to the base spirit as well. I mean, I wouldn't have picked it, obviously it's Canadian, but it certainly has a sort of a crisp sort of Canadian kind of feel to it, which is quite pleasant. And like I said, it's got a little bit of sort of licorice, and it's just stunningly balanced, just really, really well balanced. Let's see what the palate gives us. Fabulously balanced, really well balanced again. It's got that lovely sort of vanilla-y oak character with some wheaty spirit notes. Again, the herbal notes are slightly camphory, there's a little bit of spice, a little bit of licorice, touch of juniper. And again, it's all really harmonious. It lingers really nicely. The oak kind of like sort of is always kind of there, but does kind of sort of, you know, carry on right through the finish, and just sort of gives you that nice kind of vanilla-y kind of mouthfeel. Yeah, you can argue that it tends to sort of feel a little bit more whiskey-like because there's quite a lot of oak character. But you just got to love that intensity. That just works so well. And I think what you have to do with spirits like this, you know, certainly oak aged gins, is you have to forget gin, you have to forget all that kind of thing, and just say, right, this is a kind of spirit of its own. It's got its own kind of characteristics, and you're either going to really like it or you're not going to really like it. And I think you just have to kind of like, you know, put your preconceptions to a certain extent aside. So, but that I think is absolutely stunning, and that is the benchmark which all the rest of these will be measuring up to. So. Okay, so let's move on to the Cotswolds gin. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Now, there's certainly slightly more oily spirit notes kind of going on here. It's definitely got that malt character. There's some lovely orange fruit. There's almost kind of like a rose hip kind of notes. Sort of cherries. I mean, I don't think I picked this for being aged in ex-wine cask, but now I know it's kind of very, very obvious, and it's that sort of berry rosehip kind of character that's giving it away. Again, underneath there's some very, very toasty vanilla oak, and again a light mentholated herbal spiciness to it. Again, really fabulously well balanced. The oak is not OTT. You're getting all of the different elements of the oak casks with the botanicals, and it's getting really spicy now. This is my kind of gin. It has to be said. I do like the spiced ones, as you obviously remember from last week when I was talking about the Mombasa Club. But yeah, again, this is fabulously balanced, lovely oak character, really good. Let's see what the palate gives us then, shall we? The oak is possibly a little bit more heavier on the palate, a lot more creamy vanilla, spicy, winey, red fruits, again that kind of rosehip kind of character, slightly mouth-watering, nice, pleasant, almost citric kind of character, some lovely spiciness. It lingers really well. The botanicals are maybe not quite so intense on the palate, but again I don't feel that it's kind of unbalanced. It's a lovely toasty aftertaste. I mean, almost kind of like French oak, toasted French oak, in essence, with that kind of the spices kind of just giving it that kind of feel, but it obviously has the lovely American oak sort of soft vanilla character as well. And I think this is the thing with oak aged gins. You have to think, well, you know, like any spirit, you know, where am I getting the complexity from? Can I taste all the elements? Are they, you know, noticeable? Do they work all together well? And I think the thing is that this does. I mean, it doesn't taste like a gin per se, and it doesn't taste like a whiskey per se. It has its own unique character, and well, that's fine by me, as they say. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Herno. Now, like I said when I was talking about this earlier on, slight concern about the complete lack of colour, but anyway, we shall see what the nose gives us. There's a warmth to it. There's a warmth, spiciness, and a pleasant spirit character, but there's no real oak at all. And I mean, there is a little bit in the background, but it's just kind of very, you know. And I suppose what they were aiming for was not to have too much oak character, to be more delicate, to kind of, you know, balance up with the spirit. And to be honest with you, there's just not enough oak character there, I think. Maybe it should have been left for a little bit longer. I don't honestly know. Well, yes, I do know. It should have been left for longer in the cask. I'd like to have seen a little bit more vanilla. I mean, you know, it's pleasant. There's spices. There's no off notes. I mean, it is, yeah, a very classy gin. And I suppose you could argue that this is aimed more at gin drinkers that want to sort of like, you know, okay, try something a little bit different. It's not too scary. There's not too much oak. I mean, you know, there are probably a lot of gin drinkers that don't particularly like whiskey. They find it sort of too much. And so this is probably just trying to sort of move them in that direction. And so yes, you're getting plenty of the botanical notes. There's the coriander. There's the meadow sweet kind of coming through. There's a little bit of black pepper as well. But it's just, for me, it's just not quite enough oak. It's purely a matter of taste. I mean, some people, like I said, will absolutely love this because the oak is very subtle, and just, to me, the oak is just a little bit too subtle, I think. But anyway, let's see what the palate gives us. Oily, plenty of spirit character, a little bit astringent possibly. The oak is a bit bitter, and it's kind of working in with the spices to kind of like, you know, counterbalance the sort of slight sweetness of the vanilla and the meadow sweet. Again, more botanically focused, lovely herbal finish, but just again, like the nose, not quite enough oak as far as I'm concerned, for me personally. There's that slight buried note, the sort of, like I said, the kind of bitterness from the oak is kind of working in with the bitterness from the berries and the juniper, and so yeah, it's a pleasant. It's a pleasant oak aged gin, but the problem is, of course, when it comes up against things like the Black Fox and the Cotswolds, they're kind of like big and they've got loads and loads of intensity, and to a certain extent, the subtle spirits kind of lose out to a certain extent when you're judging them. Certainly once you sort of if you taste them in the wrong way, I mean, ideally I would have preferred to have tasted this one earlier because it's got the subtlety, and then you kind of build up the intensity and you see where you're going. But when you, of course, when you're judging, you have no way of knowing that. You know, all you have is kind of like an ABV and possibly an age statement if you're talking about whiskey. So you kind of have to figure it out yourself, you know. And sometimes if you do taste these spirits the wrong way round, they just, you know, they don't show particularly well. And that, I guess, is kind of like the conundrum when it comes to judging and awards and all that kind of stuff, you know. You need an element of luck on your side, I suppose. It's not just a case of having a good spirit or a good whiskey or whatever. You know, you need to have that fortune to be tasted in the right order. So anyway, but coming back to this, yeah, not a bad oak aged gin. Just like I said, for me personally, I'd like a little bit more oak character, but you know, it's horses for courses, as they say.
I've forgotten
Okay, so let's move on to the second of our Scandinavian gins. This is the Vor. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then. Oh, Struth. You could certainly say this has got plenty of spirit character. In essence, far too much spirit character. It smells like new make whiskey, and essentially this is what it is. It's obviously, you know, distilled from a barley base. There's no oak character here whatsoever. I don't really even get very much in the way of botanicals. Yeah, there's a slight juniper note, but it's really soapy and it's got loads and loads of impurities, and it's just hasn't spent even, well, certainly not long enough in the oak to remove those kind of impurities. I mean, it's interesting from a kind of an evolutionary point of view, but it's just not a kind of a nose that you would want to sort of. It just doesn't even seem like gin. It just seems like new make barley based whiskey spirit, you know, and it's a shame because I'm sure that I don't know, I've never tasted their other gin, and their other gin may well be exactly the same, full of these oily impurities. And you know, as you know, I love to know what the base spirit from a gin is. I want some indication, but the emphasis on the some. I don't want to sort of like just smell new make spirit and go, oh, that's vodka, you know. I mean, and there's a lot of vodkas that I've tasted that are exactly like that. They just taste like new make spirit, and no, I'm sorry, but this just does not work one little bit. I mean, there may well be some interesting spirit character going on here, but this is not gin at all. Anyway, let's see what the palate gives us. There's a bit more juniper on the palate. There's a biscuitiness to the spirit, but again, it's quite soapy. There's lots of kind of off the still notes, faints. There's a sort of a kind of a sweetish kind of lavender soapiness kind of going on, which really isn't my kind of cup of tea, it has to be said. And this is a big shame because I looked at the list of botanicals and I thought, wow, look at all these really interesting things: kelp, thyme, moss, This could have been such a really interesting spirit as far as I'm concerned, and it isn't, and that's a real shame, I think. I don't even get any oak. All I get is just kind of oily young spirit, and that's a real big shame. I think, I hate to say it here, but maybe they should look at using a wheat-based spirit. I don't know whether the distillery distills their base spirit. If they do, maybe they ought to look at sort of bringing in a slightly more neutral base spirit. I don't know, or maybe they need to look at their cut points. Maybe that's possibly where things are going a little bit awry. They're maybe using too much of a generous cut point. Maybe they ought to sort of scale it back and just take a smaller cut point to get less of those kind of impure characters, or just age it in oak for a little bit more longer. But then again, obviously, you then got the risk of it being over oaked. I mean, you know, God, who would be a distiller? That's all I can say. Anyway, let's move on. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Koval. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? God, bloody hell, now we're right at the other end of the spectrum. I mean, this is an oak monster. I mean, yeah, I'm getting lots and lots of lemon, but my God, it's toasty oak time. Actually, that lemon note is really quite freshening. And maybe I was a little bit hard on this when I initially tasted it for the Gin Awards. But it's a lot of oak, big oak. I mean, initially it kind of said kind of grainy, toasty French oak to me, because it's not quite such a big vanilla character that I would have expected from an American oak matured spirit. It's got more of that kind of tighter, grainy, sort of French oaky kind of character. But it's interesting. There's a little bit of juniper. There's quite a fair chunk of citrus, which, whether there is citrus in this or not, could possibly be coming from the coriander. As we know, coriander does kind of give you a very citrusy kind of character, as well as a sort of a spiciness as well. But I must admit, I'm having kind of difficulty peering through all the bloody oak. Some monster. Anyway, let's see what the palate does. Again, Oak City, it kind of starts off a little bit more milkier, and again there's that citrusy kind of note, and then in comes that more American oak on the palate. It has to be said, there's a lot more vanilla, milky vanilla kind of character, and again you can almost taste the toasty char. There's a slight note of juniper possibly on the finish, but again this is just way too oaked, and this is, like I said, from, I guess if you ignore the Vor, which is just all kind of spirit orientated, and take the Herno, you have the two different ends of the spectrum. You have possibly the under oaked and the over oaked, and this just goes to show how difficult it is with oak aging gin, getting that balance absolutely spot on. And although there's nothing wrong with it, if you like lots of overtly oaky kind of character on your spirit, this is fine. It's got a nice spiciness on the aftertaste, slightly mouth-watering, but it's just, to me, it's just all oak, and the balance is just skewed too much in that way. So yeah, there you go. That's the American. And finally, we're on to the Ableforth's Naval Strength Bathtub Cask-aged blah 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 kind of gin. So anyway, let's see what the nose gives us. Lovely earthiness, and I think they made obviously the right move in sort of aging it partly in new casks and then partly in refill, because the oak is quite grainy, it's dusty, It's vanilla-y, but it's taut. It's not overly vanilla-y. There's certainly some coriander, some almost kind of cumin-y kind of spice notes. There's juniper. Again, this is really, really well balanced. And yeah, I think it kind of works from the being a naval strength. That increased alcohol kind of obviously adds to a freshness in the spirit, which kind of like sort of stands up to the oak character. There's a slight milkiness to the oak kind of coming out now, but again, I think it's just really, really well balanced. And yeah, I remember being at the Think Gin event, and you know, I mean, obviously, all of the people there were saying that their gin was the best they would do. You know, that's, you know, you're not going to say, oh, my gin's complete crap, are you really? But shall we say they were somewhat overtly effusive. You know, this is the best gin in the world kind of stuff. You know, and well, it's not the best gin in the world. It has to be said. That's the best oak-aged gin is the Canadian, but this is still pretty impressive. And I gave it. Well, considering that I gave the Black Fox 8.9 and I gave this 8.7, it's not far away, to be honest with you, and it's really nicely balanced. There's some mentholated notes as well, which to me is classically barrel-aged gin kind of characteristics. Yeah, and it's smoky and pretty complex. So yeah, this is nose-wise really, really good. Let's see what the balance like. For 57%, my God, that slips down. That is so soft and smooth. That's dangerous stuff. Again, it kind of kicks off with more oak on the palate. There's more creaminess, more kind of toasty, charred oak notes. But you know, the juniper kind of comes through. There's a little bit of sort of coriander spice, a little bit of citrus as well, and it's, I think, quite pleasantly balanced. It's got a slight bitterness on the finish, but it's kind of like, you know, almost kind of black peppery kind of bitterness, which is obviously mingling in with the sort of slight bittering from the oak. Again, being naval strength, I suppose, gives it that sort of fresher element, but it doesn't taste overly alcoholic. And my God, it doesn't taste 57%. This is, I just remember tasting this going, ooh, that's dangerous. That's dangerous stuff, shall we say. That's serious mother's ruin, as they say, because that's going to creep up on you. I mean, you know, it does not taste like a 57% spirit should do. But yeah, really, really good, really interesting. Good intensity, good balance. What more can you say? Let's sum this week's episode of the show up. Well, I think it's been really, really interesting in actual fact. I mean, hopefully you will agree on that. I think the Black Fox bottling number 2 was just absolutely stunning. I mean, lovely intensity, you know, real sort of great balance between the oak and the botanicals and the spirit character. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. So you know, hats off to the distillery for, you know, a really impressive bottling. The Cotswolds, yeah, equally so. I think again, really, really well balanced. Oak character and spirit character really in harmony. So again, really, really good. The Hernö Juniper Cask. Yeah, I mean, I can see the attraction of it, but like I said to you when I was tasting it, I think it kind of loses out to the slightly more intense bottlings, and just for me, just not quite enough oak character. The Vor, well, yeah, okay, it could be interesting. I think, like I said in the review of it, when I was tasting it, I just think that it was just too much kind of faintiness, too much kind of oily spirit character, and just not enough of anything else in reality. So could do better, I think. The Koval, opposite end of the spectrum, obviously, to the Herno, for example, just far too much oak and just unbalanced, I guess, at the end of the day. Still quite an impressive spirit nevertheless, but just too much skewed towards the oak character for my personal liking. And the Ableforth, like I said, for a spirit of that kind of level of ABV, really easy to drink, and you know, an impressive spirit. So so yeah, there you have it. There's a selection of interesting oak-aged gins, some of which worked, some of which didn't work in my opinion. So hopefully you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. Next week, don't know what we're going to be doing next week. We'll probably do something other than gin. I think we've done gin for long enough now. So all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.